Spend the next 20 minutes feeding your brain with Formosa Fauna so you can learn all about the animal kingdom and become smarter than all of your friends. Because what better way to spend your commute or downtime? Every Friday is Formosa Fauna Friday. I'm Tristan Hildebrand, the voice of Formosa Fauna. I love animals and I love talking about them. If you're even remotely curious about animals, you're in the right place. On today's agenda, we're going to talk about multiple interesting facts regarding survival, but also a little bit about a survivor, Hugh Glass, the prevalence of pork in Taiwan, and the United States Department of Defense's potential testing on dogs. First, enjoy some fun facts about the world around us, collected by Bushcraft Buddy. On the topic of deaths, you are around 100 times more likely to be killed by a toaster than you are from a bear if you live in the United States or Canada. There is only one person naturally killed by wolves every 5 years globally. The mosquito is the deadliest animal on Earth in terms of how many deaths it causes each year, with around 1 million people dying from the diseases they spread. The hippo is the deadliest animal in terms of physical capabilities, with it being able to beat any animal on Earth in a one-on-one fight, allegedly. Between 1347 and 1351, Europe was hit by the bubonic plague, which gave every single person on the continent a 50% chance of death. The deadliest shark attack in history happened in 1945 when the USS Indianapolis was sunk and up to 150 crew were eaten by sharks. When it comes to temperatures, the coldest ever temperature recorded was taken at the Vostok Research Center in Antarctica on July 21st, 1983. First, take a wild guess at what that temperature was. Answer in 3, 2, 1. It measured 89.2 degrees below 0 Celsius. The hottest temperature was recorded at Furnace Creek in California on July 10, 1913, measuring at what temperature? Give it a wild guess. Answer in 3, 2, 1, 56.7 degrees Celsius. Water boils at different temperatures depending on altitude. Water at sea level boils at 100 degrees Celsius, but water at a height of about 30,000 feet would boil at 70 degrees Celsius. This only happens in open environments though, and water in a self-contained environment like an airplane will still boil at 100 degrees Celsius regardless of altitude. The average human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, and if it rises by just 3 degrees Celsius, you run the risk of death. When fresh lava first comes out of a volcanic vent, it normally doesn't reach temperatures higher than 1,200 degrees Celsius. This isn't even hot enough to melt iron. The body loses heat almost 30 times faster in water than it does in air. How about survival times? Jose Salvador Alvarenga was lost at sea and survived alone on a raft for 438 days and traveled more than 6,700 miles. Since his ordeal ended in 2014, he remains the record holder for longest lone survival stranded at sea. Aaron Ralston lasted for 5 days with his arm crushed under a rock and only 330 milliliters of water. Slavomir Rawitz walked for over 4,000 miles to escape the occupation during World War II. Harrison O'Keen spent 60 hours over 100 feet underwater after his ship sank upside down, trapping him in one of the cabins. And Hugh Glass crawled for almost 200 miles after almost being killed in a bear attack. His story is the basis for the film The Revenant. In a previous episode, we mentioned how unlikely it is for people to be attacked by bears, which makes the Hugh Glass story particularly fascinating. Britannica has a page dedicated to Glass, which I'll be sharing with you right now. Hugh Glass was born in 1783 and was an American frontiersman and fur trapper who became a folk hero after surviving a bear attack and then traveling hundreds of miles alone to safety. Little is known of Glass's life before 1823, when he signed up for a fur trading expedition backed by William Henry Ashley. The group departed from St. Louis in March. Several months later, they were attacked by Native Americans, and Glass was slightly wounded. In August, he was scouting near present-day Lemon, South Dakota, when he was attacked by a bear. Although the animal was killed, according to some accounts, by Glass himself, the incident left him badly injured. He reportedly had a broken leg, a ripped scalp, a punctured throat, and numerous gashes. Believing him to be mortally wounded, the expedition leaders left 2 men, John Fitzgerald and Jim Bridger, to stay with Glass until he died. However, several days later, Fitzgerald and Bridger decided to rejoin their group. They placed Glass in a shallow grave and departed with his weapons. Shortly thereafter, Glass regained enough strength to begin the arduous journey to Fort Kiowa, near present-day Chamberlain, South Dakota. Over the next 2 months, he traveled some 200 to 300 miles, or 322 to 483 kilometers. Details of his ordeal later took on legendary proportions, making it difficult to sort fact from fiction. Claims that he was able to continue only by crawling at various points are almost certainly true, but the story that he lost consciousness on one occasion and awoke to find a grizzly bear licking clean the wounds that were infested with maggots seems unlikely, according to Britannica. After recuperating at Fort Kiowa, Glass set out to kill Bridger and Fitzgerald for abandoning him. After finding Bridger, Glass forgave him because of his age. Bridger was 19 years old at the time of the incident. Accounts differ concerning Fitzgerald. Some say that Fitzgerald had joined the army and was thus safe from any retaliation by Glass. Other sources, however, claim that Glass found Fitzgerald and forgave him as well. Glass eventually resumed trapping. About in 1833, he was on an expedition near Fort Cass, present-day Treasure County, Montana, when he was killed. His legend lives on through numerous articles and books, as well as several films, including The Revenant, a 2015 film in which Leonardo DiCaprio starred as Glass. While probably overshadowed by the presidential election, the United States is voting on something else that is significant in the world of animal rights, as the U.S. Congress votes to cut funding for cruel dog and cat experiments following an exclusive story shared by World Animal News. Back in June, World Animal News revealed how the U.S. Department of Defense is spending $1 million on dog experiments, and how the White Coat Waste Project was able to uncover such information in their investigation. Allegedly, they discovered that the U.S. Army ordered a total of $1 million worth of experiments on beagles to test the toxicity of an experimental drug. Such tests began in August 2023 and were expected to run until the end of July this year. Specifically, the toxicity tests involved the dogs being poisoned with massive doses of the experimental drugs for months consecutively. Pain relief is withheld entirely in some cases and results in the dogs passing away in other cases. The dog test apparently aims to secure approval from the Food and Drug Administration for the drug, despite the FDA stating that human drugs don't need to be tested on dogs. The use of dogs in wound and weapons experiments has been prohibited for a long time. However, a loophole in the regulations has allegedly allowed the continued mistreatment of dogs when it comes to drug testing. Additionally, the Department of Defense has acknowledged that animal models have limited relevance to humans and poorly predict the effects that they have on humans. Following the report and story, the U.S. House of Representatives unanimously passed a bipartisan amendment to the 2025 defense budget, cutting funding for the Department of Defense's dog and cat testing. When Congress returns after the election in November, it will be voting on the 2025 defense budget. Democrats and Republicans are working in Congress with a diverse coalition of veterans groups, animal advocates, and others to ensure the amendment defunding the Department of Defense's dog and cat testing is included in the final bill. Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who led the amendment to defund the Department of Defense's dog and cat testing, said, "Taxpayers don't want their money spent on unnecessary and harmful experiments. I will continue to work across the aisle with my colleagues to end inhumane tests on dogs and cats. Back in 2009, according to the Council of Agriculture, 40 kilograms of pork were consumed per person annually in Taiwan, which was significantly more than beef, chicken, duck, or mutton. In fact, those 40 kilograms were about 12 times more than beef and 28 times more than mutton. Also, an astounding 8 kilograms more than the amount of chicken, duck, and goose meat eaten combined. Fast forward to 2022, the Ministry of Agriculture released its annual statistics on the consumption of meats and grains in Taiwan, revealing that more people were eating poultry, primarily chicken, than any other kind of meat. According to the report, the average meat consumption per person last year reached 87.5 kilograms, surpassing the average grain consumption of 87.42 kilograms per person. It was also the first time in history that people in Taiwan were eating more meat than grains. It's a little challenging to really determine which meat is the most prominent in Taiwanese society, especially when you consider that the national dish is beef noodle soup, despite the majority of beef being imported, especially from the US. However, the type of meat that truly stands out to me is pork, which Taiwan produced about 805 metric tons of in 2022. Pork dishes are typically lower priced, likely due to the livestock being locally raised, making pork appear in 热炒店 dishes, breakfast sandwiches, and danbing, and of course, 卤肉饭, which is braised pork rice. Thousands of people marched in Taipei's streets in 2022 after the president at the time, Tsai Ing-wen, lifted a long-standing ban on American pork and beef. The decision was met with fierce opposition, both by the opposition Kuomintang Party and individual citizens. The policy allowed imports of pork with acceptable residues of ractopamine, a drug added into animal feed that promotes the growth of lean meat that some farmers use in pigs. The drug is banned by the European Union, but is legal in the United States. It is for reasons including concerns such as those that restaurants in Taiwan are required to comply with publicly posting what country meat products are from. A squirrel named Peanut living in New York gained a massive following online, largely due to the cuteness and the story of Peanut's past. Peanut was rescued 7 years ago after being found orphaned and injured as a baby and nursed back to health. Following anonymous complaints, officers from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, seized both Peanut and a raccoon named Fred from Mark Longo's home in rural Pine City near the Pennsylvania border. With a rapidly growing Instagram following of 698,000, Peanut was adored by fans around the world. Tens of thousands of people signed an online petition demanding his return. Unfortunately, though, in New York, wild animals are regarded as property, offering little legal recourse. We learn from reports and first-hand accounts that, rescued as an infant, Peanut was unable to develop the essential survival skills needed for returning to the wild, leading to the decision to keep him indoors for his well-being. As for Fred, the raccoon, Lango said he only had the raccoon for a few months and hoped to rehabilitate the injured animal and release him back into the wild eventually. On the day Peanut and Fred were taken, DEC officials cited state regulations prohibiting the ownership of wild animals, as well as concerns that the animals could potentially carry rabies. Despite Peanut being docile and posing no threat, current laws allow authorities to seize and euthanize wild animals deemed a public health risk, often without notice or an appeal process for the owners. Tragically, because rabies tests cannot be performed on live animals, the DEC moved swiftly to euthanize Peanut and Fred despite protests from both their owner and the public. Pleas to rehome the animals or send them to a sanctuary were denied. According to the D.C. Department of Health, no person in the U.S. has ever contracted rabies from a squirrel. Regardless of a squirrel's behavior, if bitten, a tetanus vaccine is recommended if it has been more than 5 years since the last vaccination. The decision to euthanize both Peanut and Fred has not only devastated their owners and supporters, it has also sparked calls for urgent reform of New York's wildlife regulations. Advocates are demanding more humane approaches for handling such rescued wildlife, especially those that have become long-term pets. In response to the outcry, New York Assemblyman and animal advocate Jake Blumenkranz introduced Peanut's Law, the Humane Animal Protection Act. This proposed legislation seeks to reform the process of animal seizure and euthanasia by requiring authorities to provide advance notice and allow an appeal before euthanizing animals taken from sanctuaries or private homes. The law aims to ensure fairer treatment and a more compassionate approach for animals like Peanut, who have lived with humans for years. After rescuing Peanut, Lango was inspired to open his own rescue, Peanuts, P'(nuts), Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary, which opened in April 2023. The sanctuary now houses about 300 animals, including horses, goats, and alpacas. Lango runs the sanctuary with his wife, Daniela, and other family members. This was all reported on by Karen Lapisco for World Animal News. I think some less negative current events regarding animals would be nice, which leads me to share the story of dogs in Nepal, where they are worshipped. NBC reported on this news. The annual Kukur Puja festival took place last Thursday, during which dogs across the nation of Nepal were draped in marigold garlands marked with celebratory vermilion pigment and presented with overflowing platters of treats. Like Diwali in India, the 5-day Hindu festival of Tihar, being celebrated this week in Nepal, is a festival of lights. Unlike Diwali, Tihar includes the worship of creatures, and Kukur Puja, on its second day, is dedicated to dogs. According to Hindu mythology, dogs are the messengers of Yamaraj, the god of death. His 2 four-eyed dogs are said to track down the dying and guard their path into his realm. Celebrating dogs is believed to please Yamaraj. All dogs, including pets, stray dogs, and working dogs, are worshipped. For example, at the Armed Police Force Canine Center in Kathmandu, Nepal's capital, service dogs lined up with their handlers. Then one by one, police officers marked their foreheads with the vermilion, draped them in flowers, and presented them with snacks and a ritual appreciation of their role in providing security. The deputy branch chief of the Canine Division stated, "Today we honor these dogs for their invaluable contributions as they determinedly assist in keeping us safe, from detecting explosives to rescuing those in need during disasters." The 5 days of the festival are dedicated to celebrating creatures, the first day of which is dedicated to crows. They offer grain, seeds, and sweets by scattering them on rooftops and streets. Oxen and humans are among some of the other creatures also celebrated. What do you say? It certainly sounds like a celebration that I'd be interested in attending. Have you ever had a memorable experience with an animal? I would love to hear about it. If you're a fan of snail mail, you can send me letters via the post, and if you're more digital, you can send me an email. That way I can read it on air to share with all of our lovely Formosa Fauna friends. If you're sending in a letter, the address can be found online. Just look for the number 55 Bayan Road address in Taipei, Taiwan. Or write your emails to tristan@rti.org.tw. That is tristan@rti.org.tw. Making it to the end of an episode makes you a Formosa Fauna friend. It's not gross, okay? It's cute. Thank you for tuning in, friend. All animals require enrichment, and Formosa Fauna is just that. After all, we're all just a bunch of wild animals. See you next time for Formosa Fauna Fridays here on Radio Taiwan International.